think it's just be curious. I mean, you have something in you that you want to offer, and being curious and talking to people and being empathetic, listening to their stories, you begin to match what you have in you to what the world needs from you. And in terms of starting a business, which could be something as small as a hobby that grows into a business, or you can full on launch a business, is being curious, being empathetic, listening to stories, cluing in on the needs of people, the needs of systems, and what you have to offer that matches that.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Sean Baxter. And Sean, or as he likes to go by Baxter, went to high school in New York and first became passionate about medicine. So decided he wanted to pursue that until he did an internship and then found out he didn't want to do medicine quite so much. Then went to UVA on a scholarship. But partied maybe a bit too much in his own words, and so lost the scholarship, but was able to stay at UVA nonetheless. Switched majors over to, I think, a theater major, and then after school went back to New York, worked in the film industry for several years, and then around 2008 decided to explore a new industry, moved over to Colorado, and moved into UX design, or user experience design. About 2 years ago, decided to focus on employee experience and launched a consultancy, which is Misfit Island, and continues to do the consultancy and help people that are talented and employers and employees and companies to be successful. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Baxter.
Hi, thank you, Devin. I appreciate you inviting me here. I'm looking forward to a great discussion. So let's do it.
Absolutely. So I just gave a quick run through of a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that a bit? So tell us how your journey got started in high school in New York.
Yeah, let's rewind it, right? So I'm from the Bronx, grew up there, first generation American. My parents are from the Caribbean, so I spent a good chunk of my childhood in the on the island of Trinidad, as well as growing up in New York. I went to high school in Harlem and graduated with this idea that I was going to become a doctor. But in my senior year, I went to did an internship at Mount Sinai Hospital, Manhattan, and when I saw dead bodies, blood on the table, different things like that, because I wanted to be a surgeon, I said, you know what, this feels too emotionally weighty. I don't think I could do this for the rest of my life. And so, with a strong math and science acumen, I didn't really quite know until someone from UVA during the recruiting process said, you know, this you would be a great fit for the engineering school. And I had aspirations of designing rockets. Who knows if I stuck with it, I could have been working with Elon designing SpaceX stuff, but I didn't because as you mentioned, I was my first time really away from home on my own, and you just it's UVA at the time was known as one of the top 25 party schools, and I found every party that I could get myself into, and so my classwork and my attendance started to slip, and eventually that spiraled down to where I had a meeting with the dean, and he said, your grades aren't good enough. We have a very strong program here, and you're not going to be able to stay with us. But when they looked at all of my grades collectively, they said, you're just squeaking by to be able to stay at UVA. So
Mm.
I wandered around to different classes, eventually went to a theater class really on a whim. And I remember just the accolades that my classmates, my teachers were putting on me, saying, wow, you're so natural, you're effervescent, this is where you belong. You have found a family. And, it didn't take me long by the second class I was in to say, yeah, I feel good about this. And graduated with a degree in theater, and went back to New York, where I thought I was going to work, primarily Broadway, that type of stuff. But then I was convinced to go back to school, actually. and pursue a film degree, which was in Virginia again at a university, Regent University. Was there for a few years, got a degree in film. Was classmates with Tony Hale. Before that, Tina Fey. So two people who've gone on to great success. I did not follow in that success, but I certainly learned from people who were very skilled in my classes, and but went back to New York and started working the film network, the circuit, and so forth.
So now one question, just out of curiosity, and you
Yeah.
touched on it just a bit. So whereas in UA, you going to UVA on scholarship, partied a bit too much, which I get. You go to school and you're like, this is great, I'm on my own, and there's lots of fun things to do, and oh, I don't need to go to class, I'll be fine. And then it doesn't quite always work out that way. But what were you studying before you switched to theater?
Yeah, I was studying aerospace engineer, and so we were learning Cobol and Fortran, some languages that may still, some computer languages that may still exist. And that's about as far as I got. It's just in those computer language, computer science classes, the upper level classes that I would have focused on. I never got to.
Mm. Now, follow-up question to that, which is so, and that's what I thought what you mentioned, which is okay, you're doing all that. How did you go from that to theater? Now, not saying anything's wrong with either. It just seems like it is a drastically different set of skills and direction to go from one to the other. So what made you decide to go to theater?
Yeah, in all fairness, when I was just in high school in New York, there were definitely people I hung out with that were involved in either music production. A lot of them auditioned, did modeling. So I was around a crowd that just in general were taking advantage of everything New York had to offer. So it wasn't such a foreign concept to me when I was in there. But when they presented the options to me after they told me I had to leave the engineering school, they said, well, here's a general liberal arts degree you can look at. And I took material science and another math class, and I really tried to focus on the science side of things, but just in the liberal arts side. And I needed to honestly fill one more credit because you had to have a certain amount of credits to be considered full time. And so with that spot, I just chose theater because I thought it would just be fun. I thought it would be easy. And after doing the class, I was just like, this is great. This is more than, I mean, it's difficult. You have to kind of dig into your emotions and so forth. But I just found it really just energetic.
No, that's awesome and definitely makes sense. So you do that, and so now you're coming out and saying, okay, coming out of theater, going back to New York, you're gonna kind of work in that industry. And I think you worked in the film industry for several years. Is that right?
Yeah, I worked in the film industry for about 7 years, 5 years or so in New York, and then the rest of it outside of New York, mostly in Virginia, doing small studio type of television work. So I would say film and television. But while I
Mm.
was in New York, really, it's kind of funny. I was a recent graduate of film school, and I remember my sister and I were just walking downtown New York, and we saw a film in progress. I believe that film was Great Expectations with Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow. So dating myself there way back, and we were just watching, and my sister was like, "Hey, you should go talk to that guy and see if you can get on this film set." I'm thinking that's not the way it works. You have to have like representation and all these different things, and so but being bold and kind of not knowing how I was going to get in, I walked over to someone, said, "Is there any way I can get on this film set?" And they pointed me to someone else, and that person just looked me up and down and said, "I'm going to give you a chance." Handed me a walkie-talkie, told me to go talk to someone else where I was going to report, and that's kind of how I got into working on my first set, with many more to follow.
Well, awesome. Well, that's kind of fun that you're able to get, although dating yourself, kind of see some of the stars, work with them, work in the film industry, and go that path. Now, as you're working in the film industry, I think you mentioned at some point along there you were looking to change things up or to go in a different direction or take a pause or a break. Is that about right?
Yeah, what happened was in so over the time, I'm really into the craft of filmmaking. I studied it, and just all the elements that truly make a great story and a great storytelling experience. And in 2008 or so, now you have the rise of digital cameras. They weren't great, but people were just picking up cameras, pointing them, and recording and saying, "I'm a filmmaker." And I started, almost from an elitist standpoint, started saying, I don't know about that, but they were actually taking jobs away from me. They were actually moving up the chain in terms of doing productions that were, not necessarily well funded, but they were certainly getting some notoriety. And I felt like, I'm not sure I like where this industry is going. This is also around the time of the 2008, the bubble bursting, and production was down, and I just didn't see how I was going to fit in to this new world order of filmmaking, and I didn't really think it was going to survive, and I didn't know if that was really how I saw the rest of my career going, where there was seemingly a loss of focusing on the craft. So at that
Mm,
point, I said I should look at where I want to take my life, let alone my career.
no, makes perfect sense. So, and I think you at that point you decided to go to Colorado. Is that right?
Yeah, so I spent. I'm one of those people. Probably sent out well over 1,000. The goal was really to just find a job, and I sent out over 1,000 resumes. And fortunately, email was beginning to really pick up as a way of sending resumes rather than sticking it in the mail. Otherwise, I don't think I could have afforded it. I was out of a job, so I was just looking all over the country. And there were a few jobs that popped up in Colorado that I thought, oh, this, doing production work, this could be interesting. And while looking in Colorado, I found a program called Boulder Digital Works at the time that eventually became several other entities that now is a part of the University of Colorado. But back then, it was just this experimental program. They were only on their second cohort, which is the one I joined. And they didn't quite know what they were, but they said it's a convergence of business, technology, and design. Come join us and help us figure out what this is going to be. And so I was actually just excited about the opportunity to study. And their approach wasn't so much a school as it was a practicum. So you would go in and do work for big companies, small companies, and through the process of doing guided work by some instructors, you would learn how to take these concepts and make it into something. What that something was remained to be seen.
Mm. So you get into Colorado, and so how did you figure out? So you can kind of get that idea, but how did you figure out what job or what you're going to do as far as employment and where you're going to get started? Because New York to California, I'm assuming you don't have a lot of connections or people that or experience in that area. So how did you kind of get started, or where did you get, or how did you get to that first position?
Yeah, and if I could be real and vulnerable, I mean, at the time I was living in Maryland, and the job that brought me to Maryland, where I was a producer, had layoffs. As a matter of fact, by the end of that year, the entire marketing team had been scrapped. But I was in that first wave, and so I was out of work for some time, and I was on, public assistance, looking for a job, just desperately trying to support a wife and 3 kids, and when I found out that this program was in Boulder, and I knew that Boulder seemed to be on the rise in terms of not being impacted as much by the economic downturn of the country. I thought, well, one, I could just probably find a job. I'll be willing to work anything. And two, this would put me on a path to employment that was one, would be in demand, and two, would be more lucrative consistently than I was experiencing in production. So moving out, I came out and just tried to figure it out as I went, and I was able to kind of pick up side jobs while finishing the 1 year program.
Hmm. So now finish the 1 year program, and then I think that you did UX and design. Now fast forwarding just a bit to the more near the present day, I think
Yeah.
about 2 years ago, you decided to strike out on your own and do a consultancy. So kind of before that, I assume you were working for others and doing some of that or jobs and getting that experience, and then you decided to strike out on your own. Was that about right, or how did that go?
Yeah, 10 years working at agencies, startups, large corporations in LA and in Colorado. And so it's just, going in, combining my new skills with production, and started off as a digital producer. Decided I didn't really want to live out in LA. That wasn't the best place to raise my family from from my perspective. So came back to Colorado and found a bunch of startups and eventually large corporations to work for, just doing design, doing research, and just really honing my craft in that area. It was great. I was doing well. Still enjoy it, but in 2020, the whole country really had changed again. So I experienced a big change in 2008, and now there was a not only social unrest, but just a lot of things that made me think there are some issues, there are some problems, and UX design, really human-centered design, is all about identifying problems and solving them through various techniques. And I felt like I could do more than just putting out and help, or helping a company out put out the latest software, and do something at a more grand scale in terms of how can I use these same design and research skills to help move the needle in terms of some of the social justice and social issues that I found. And so I launched my company with that in mind. It was initially focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, but over time, what I discovered is that there was really a need for things to change at the root level within the company. The culture that they created actually would have an impact on people's lives. And so when they went home, when they were off hours, they are still themselves. And what
Mm,
state would they be in? And really, it was this sense of I wanted people to go home and be able to love on their families, be happy individuals, and then go back and contribute to society. And it's a little bit idealistic, but I knew that the principles of research and design really applied to that problem as well.
mm. No, I think that definitely makes sense. So now so about 2 years ago, decide, okay, going to make that leap, start your consultancy, start to go down that path and, kind of make that transition to what you think is more beneficial to people. How did it go? Was it a great success? Rocket ship to the top, and from day one you were a millionaire, or it was ran into the ground and it was a miserable slog and you wish you'd never made that leap, or somewhere in between, or how did it go for you?
Well, I think, like my counselor said, are you ever really making mistakes, or are you always just learning? So every decision really becomes a learning point. Definitely don't regret making that shift. I think I would have hoped to have done more preparation. That everyone learns different, and I kind of learned trial by fire. So I jumped in with very little knowledge of how to start a business. Certainly, there were things you learned when you're involved in production, because every production in film is really almost like a new business launching. So I was able to do that multiple times during my film career. So I was able to glean and lean on some of those understandings and skill sets. But there was certainly a huge learning curve. It
Mm,
wasn't too long that a client actually stumbled upon my website and hired me. And it was a really meaty project that took multiple months to service. And it really helped establish kind of the financial basis to continue to build the business. So that was more of a stumble upon lucky type of thing. And in
mm,
my mind, I could do this all day. People were just going to stumble and find me and give me a lot of money to do great work for them. But that wasn't the case. And so really, it's been a challenge on how to resonate with people. I know that I'm offering something that will absolutely be valuable to them, but they're inundated with people selling them and promising and not delivering, and this just all of that noise that you have to filter to say,
mm.
I can really help you. I can really move the needle. I can really impact your financials if you give me a chance. So learning how to sell has been a huge. I mean, I remember Mark Cuban said he wished that everyone would just learn, would become a salesperson, because they would learn so many things. I didn't choose to, but then I found out to run a business, you have to be out there selling. And what selling means a lot of different things. My definition of that has changed multiple times over the last year and a half.
No, and I like I think that almost, and I think that's why Mark Cuban says it, but in basically every industry, the people that are able to be successful, and whether it's you're working for someone else or you're working or for yourself, sales is always a part of that. In other words, it's, but where you particularly find that out is when you're doing your own thing. I mean, if you're working for someone else and they're feeding you projects, and yeah, it may be more beneficial for your career if you bring on, people or bring on customers, but hey, as long as they're feeding you projects, you get it done and get it done on time, maybe so, but you get out on your own, like you have to be able to sell and be able, I think that people sometimes have the misconception, especially if it's like a product, well, I'll put it out online and everybody will magically find it and they'll just buy it and it'll be perfect. And even in the service-based industry, like attorneys are horrible at it. Oh, I'll just go and offer my legal services and people just knocking down my door and no matter where you are, you're always going to have to learn to sell. So I think that that is definitely makes sense. So with that, so give us an idea where, kind of with that as your journey, where are you at today? How are things going? And where's the future hold for you?
Yeah, this is the part that I love because I've been on a journey, right? And the business has evolved, it's morphed, it's changed its focus. And one of the things recently in the last couple of months, I realized I love filmmaking. I actually miss it now. And now that I see, everything from people who've, blown up on YouTube to independent films to all of these streaming services looking for really great content, I started saying, well, one of these days, I don't know when, I want to weave back to that industry. And I had an epiphany really not too long ago where I realized that, what I do is I apply research and design to helping companies with their company culture, employee engagement. But what really drives that is the stories of the individuals, the story of your brand to customers. And story is at the heart, whether that's an analytical story or a narrative story. People are driven by stories so that they understand what you offer, they understand the benefit to their lives, and they understand how they can use that to better themselves. And so
Mm,
I started saying, as a part of my services, I'm going to expand out. And I could look back through everything I could find on all my old hard drives, different projects like that I've done on the side, not really focusing on it. And I brought that all together to say, hey, if you have a story that you want to tell to your employees or your customers, let that be a part of the experience along with the research and designing of your company culture. Don't let it happen by accident. Let's get together and be intentional about making sure that everyone understands your mission and your values. And so now I kind of feel like I have a complete package to offer, really to meet people where they're at. If a company is just starting up and they want to announce to the world, we can do something like that while also making sure that they're creating a magnetic and attractive culture to bring in the top talent to help them deliver on the promise that maybe they're have to their stakeholders or investors or to themselves about being successful with their brand. And so
mm.
I'm really excited about what the future holds now that we kind of have this holistic 360-degree view that we can offer to our clients.
Definitely makes perfect sense. So awesome. Well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey and even looking a little bit into the future, great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each journey or the present day of each journey, which is first question I always ask is along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Yeah, I think the worst decision I made really is trying to be too perfect, trying to get everything in order. And I know I just mentioned I wish I had learned more before I started, but I learned by just jumping in. Even with saying that, a lot of that is colored by the fact that I've learned. But really, to start, it's like I'm trying to just tick every box and listen to everyone. And what do I need to do next? And tick every box even before I actually went out with the idea, which is interesting because that's almost the antithesis of how you approach research and design, which is much more start lean, iterate, and go from there. And so I think the worst decision I made is just really trying to do things perfect. What I've learned from it is start messy. The
Mm,
miraculous transformation comes after you just get started. So that would be my advice to anyone: is start messy. Don't try to be perfect. It's impossible to predict and figure out everything before you get there. But when you dive in, you're able to kind of feel the water and kind of smell the ocean and just begin to swim in it and get it around you. And then it starts almost like I'm mixing metaphors here, but then it starts like a cycle where it starts building upon itself, and you can't see that to the degree without just being in it.
mm. No, that makes perfect sense. So awesome. Well, now is with that as a mistake that's been made, but also one that's been learned from. Jump to the second question. So now, if you're talking to somebody who's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
Yeah, I think it's just be curious. I mean, you have something in you that you want to offer, and being curious and talking to people and being empathetic, listening to their stories, you begin to match what you have in you to what the world needs from you. And in terms of starting a business, which could be something as small as a hobby that grows into a business, or you can full on launch a business, is being curious, being empathetic, listening to stories, cluing in on the needs of people, the needs of systems, and what you have to offer that matches that. And if it's not a fit to the beginning, Misfit Island, right? It's all about that misfit. It's really just figuring out where you're going to land with what you have in your heart. And I kind of use that as a way of saying, like, you were born to do something. What that something is, you may not know. But again, start messy, start figuring out and becoming more self-aware of who you are, and then figure out as you engage with other people and other things where the match is, and then build upon it. And then it might take you, similar to Edison, it might take you 1,000 tries before you land on the big light bulb that transforms the world.
No, I think that's definitely all great takeaways and a great piece of advice. So, well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Everything is on the website, everything from the podcast that you can subscribe to watching some of the branded films. And the website is simply Misfit Island, not misfitisland.com, but Misfit Island. The dot goes between the S and the L. So it's MISFITIS.LAND. So I'm taking advantage of that domain of land. And then, yeah, you'll find some great stuff. I think some inspirational stuff. It'll connect you to the YouTube channel and everything else. And I'd love to connect with me on all of those social media platforms, which you can find on the website.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, and otherwise utilize a great service. And if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Now,
you, guys.
for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. So I want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Baxter, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Look forward to hearing from people.